The Kincaid family gatherings were less about celebration and more about status exhibition. This lavish wedding at the Bellevue Estate overlooking Lake Michigan promised to be especially excruciating. I smoothed my simple navy dress as I approached the reception hall, already dreading the next 6 hours of thinly veiled judgment and comparison. I spotted my name card on the seating chart and followed the elaborate calligraphy to table 19, tucked away in the far corner of the ballroom. As I approached, the high-pitched squeals of children greeted me. Plastic cups of juice, dinosaur-shaped chicken nuggets, crayons scattered across paper tablecloths. The kids' table. They had seated me, Captain Eliza Morgan, 35-year-old combat veteran and financial strategist, at the children's table. "Auntie Liza, you're sitting with us?" My 7-year-old nephew Trevor launched himself at my legs, his hands sticky with something unidentifiable. "Apparently so," I replied, ruffling his hair while scanning the room for my mother. I found her across the ballroom, adjusting the bride's train for what must have been the 15th photo opportunity. When she caught my eye, she offered a small, apologetic shrug before turning away. My sister Madison, radiant in her designer gown, was surrounded by our extended family near the head table. The Kincaids and their in-laws, doctors, executives, and real estate developers, clustered together like peacocks showing their feathers. Their conversation, punctuated by deliberate laughter, carried across the room. "Did you see Eliza's table assignment?" My cousin Penelope's voice, though hushed, reached me clearly. "I told Mom we should have at least put her with the elderly, aunts, but space was tight with all of Bradley's investment partners attending. Well, it's not like she would have anything to contribute to the conversations at the adult tables," my brother-in-law's sister replied. "What would she talk about? Military rations and discount shopping?" I gripped the back of a tiny chair, briefly contemplating walking straight out of the reception. 4 tours in Afghanistan had taught me tactical withdrawal after all. But something kept me rooted to the spot. Perhaps the same stubborn pride that had carried me through Ranger School when half my class had dropped out. "You gonna sit down, Auntie?" Trevor asked, offering me a green crayon. I smiled at him, feeling a genuine warmth I hadn't experienced since arriving in Chicago 3 days ago. "Absolutely, buddy. Green happens to be my favorite color." I folded my 5'10" frame into the child-sized chair, knees nearly touching my chin, and accepted the crayon. Around me, 5 children between the ages of 5 and 8 regarded me with more genuine interest than any adult in my family had shown since my discharge 4 years ago. "Are you really a soldier?" asked a little girl I recognized as my cousin's daughter. I was. Army. "But I'm not anymore," I replied, helping myself to a grape juice box, apparently my beverage option for the evening. "Did you shoot bad guys?" Trevor whispered with the solemnity only a 7-year-old discussing combat could muster. "Sometimes I had to protect my team," I answered carefully. "But mostly I protected people who couldn't protect themselves." "Cool," he declared, before turning his attention to creating an elaborate dinosaur battle scene on his paper tablecloth. From my vantage point, I could observe the entire room while remaining largely invisible. My sister's new in-laws, the Prescotts, were exactly as described: wealthy, connected, and very aware of both facts. Bradley Prescott III, my new brother-in-law, kept glancing at his watch despite the professional photographer directing. His gaze toward his bride. My parents circulated between tables, my father's hand perpetually clutching a Scotch glass, my mother's smile growing increasingly fixed as the evening progressed. They paused longer at some tables than others, particularly those containing potential investors for my father's latest development project. "Did you know," I overheard him saying to an elegant older couple, "that Bradley's firm just acquired the Highland Towers downtown? Prime real estate. My Madison certainly landed on her feet." I doodled absent-mindedly on my placemat, adding turrets and a moat to Trevor's dinosaur kingdom. The irony wasn't lost on me. My family thought I was the stray, the one who had failed to launch despite my degrees from West Point and Georgetown. Little did they know that while Madison was landing on her feet by marrying into money, I had built something substantial in the shadows of their dismissal. The wedding planner swept past our table, doing a double take when she noticed an adult among the children. "I'm so sorry, there must have been a mistake with the seating chart," she whispered, mortification evident in her expression. "No mistake," I replied pleasantly. "This is exactly where the bride's sister belongs." The confusion on her face almost made the humiliation worthwhile. Almost. The wedding planner retreated, and I returned to my Dinosaur Kingdom construction project. Trevor was delighted with my additions, especially the drawbridge made from folded napkins. "You're way more fun than the other grown-ups," he declared, offering me a chicken nugget as apparent payment for my architectural contributions. Across the room, the 5-tiered wedding cake emerged, a monstrosity of fondant and edible gold leaf that had cost more than my first car. My mother caught my eye again and gestured for me to join the family for photos. I extricated myself from the tiny chair with as much dignity as possible, brushing dinosaur-shaped cracker crumbs from my dress. "Don't worry, I'll guard the castle," Trevor promised solemnly as I left. As I approached the family gathering, my brother Andrew slipped his arm around my shoulders. "Sorry about the seating arrangement, Liz. Madison insisted the wedding planner follow some complicated algorithm for optimal guest interaction. Optimal interaction would be me not attending. At all?" I muttered, forcing a smile as the photographer arranged us in ascending height order. "Don't be like that," Andrew sighed. "It's her big day." "It's fine," I replied, taking my place between our teenage cousin and elderly aunt. "I actually had more interesting conversations at that table than I've had since arriving in Chicago." The photographer snapped away as Madison positioned herself in the center of the family tableau, Bradley looking increasingly impatient beside her. When the formal shots were complete, guests drifted back to their assigned tables for dinner service, and I prepared to return to my juvenile dining companions. "Oh, Eliza, stay for a minute," my mother insisted, catching my arm. "Bradley's father wants to meet all the immediate family." Bradley Prescott II was an imposing figure in his bespoke tuxedo, his silver hair perfectly coiffed. He extended a manicured hand toward me and offered a practiced smile. "So you're the military sister," he said, his gaze assessing me like a commodity on a trading floor. "Madison mentioned you served in Iraq, was it?" "Afghanistan," I corrected. "4 tours. Ah, yes, brave, very brave," he replied dismissively, already shifting his attention to Andrew, the successful surgical resident. "And you must be the doctor in the family. Bradley mentions your research frequently." I took the opportunity to slip away, but my mother's voice halted my escape. "Eliza's between jobs at the moment," she announced to the group, her tone suggesting she was discussing a wayward teenager rather than a combat veteran with 2 master's degrees. "She's taking some time to find herself." The sympathetic nods from the assembled guests made my jaw clench. The narrative my family had constructed of Eliza the lost soul, the struggling veteran, the perpetual disappointment, was so at odds with reality that it bordered on fiction. "Actually," I began, but was interrupted by the wedding planner announcing dinner service. "We can catch up properly tomorrow at brunch," my mother said, already guiding Bradley's parents toward the head table. "You are coming to the 4 Seasons, aren't you?" "Wouldn't miss it," I replied, my tone flat. I made my way back to table 19, where Trevor had saved me a chocolate milk. The dinner options for our table were limited to the aforementioned chicken nuggets or mac and cheese. Neither of which appealed after a day of stress and formality. "I'll be right back," I told my young companions, slipping toward the kitchen area. A sympathetic server, noting my predicament, smuggled me a plate from the adult menu, filet mignon with truffle risotto. I brought my contraband dinner back to the kids' table, where it was regarded with awe and immediate requests for sharing. "I've got plenty," I assured them, cutting small portions for those brave enough to try grown-up food. As we ate, I found myself relaxing for the first time since arriving in Chicago. The children asked straightforward questions without judgment, laughed easily, and seemed genuinely interested in my stories, carefully edited for content, about traveling the world. My phone buzzed in my clutch. I normally wouldn't answer during a family event, but given my exile to the children's section, I felt social etiquette rules had already been sufficiently bent. The caller ID displayed Diana Rodriguez, CFO. "Excuse me, guys. I need to take this," I said, stepping away from the table. "Eliza." Diana's voice came through clearly despite the reception's background noise. "I'm sorry to interrupt the wedding, but we just received the signed documents from Meridian Trust. The acquisition is complete." A wave of satisfaction washed over me. Everything went through according to the timeline? Yes, and we're already implementing the transition plan. The press release goes out Monday morning at 9 a.m. Eastern. I just thought you'd want to know immediately. You were right. Thank you, Diana, I replied, watching my family from across the room. They were laughing, clinking glasses, completely unaware that their worlds were about to shift dramatically. "There's one more thing," Diana continued, her tone changing slightly. "Among the property portfolios we've acquired, there's something interesting I think you should know about." I'm listening. The Highland Towers development, the one that Bradley Prescott's firm just supposedly acquired? They didn't actually purchase it outright. They're leveraged to the hilt with Meridian providing the financing. I watched Bradley mime a golf swing to appreciative laughter from his fraternity brothers. "Which means," I began, the implications crystallizing. "Which means Sentinel Financial now holds their mortgage. All of them, actually. We own the debt on every Prescott Holdings property in the Midwest," Diana confirmed, "including the Bellevue Estate where you're standing right now." The irony was almost too perfect. 4 years ago, I had founded Sentinel Financial with my military separation pay and combat bonuses, focusing on ethical property management and veteran housing initiatives. What had begun as a small operation had grown exponentially as our reputation for fair practices attracted investors and partners. Now, through this acquisition of Meridian Trust, Sentinel had inadvertently become the financial backbone of my brother-in-law's supposed real estate empire. "Eliza? Are you still there?" Diana asked after my prolonged silence. "I'm here," I replied, watching my parents fawn over Bradley's father. Just processing the cosmic joke of it all. "Should we alert the Prescotts about the change in ownership before the press release?" I considered the question. The professional thing would be immediate disclosure. The satisfying thing would be to let them read about it with everyone else on Monday morning. Follow standard acquisition protocol, I decided. No special treatment, but no surprises either. Send the standard notification email to all mortgage holders tomorrow. As I ended the call, I noticed my mother approaching with a concerned expression. "Eliza, who was that? It's rude to take calls during your sister's reception," she scolded. "Just work," I replied vaguely. "Work? But you're between jobs." "Yes, so you keep telling everyone," I finished for her. "Mother, do you actually know what I do for a living?" She blinked, momentarily thrown by the direct question. "Well, you were in the Army, and then you were doing something with property management, I believe? Low-income housing?" "Close enough," I said, unable to suppress a small smile. "How are the Prescotts enjoying their acquisition of Highland Towers?" "Oh, they're thrilled. Bradley Sr. says it's the cornerstone of their expansion into luxury residential properties. Why do you ask?" "Just making conversation," I replied. "I should get back to my table. The dinosaur kingdom won't defend itself." My mother's eyes softened slightly. "I'm sorry about the seating, Eliza. There simply wasn't room with all of Bradley's business associates." "It's fine," I assured her. "I'm actually having a great time with Trevor and the others." As she walked away, I glanced at my watch. 48 hours until the press release. 48 hours until the Kincaids and Prescotts discovered that the family disappointment, relegated to dining with children, now controlled the financial destiny of their precious Highland Towers, and, by extension, the future of Prescott Holdings itself. Trevor waved enthusiastically from our table, having constructed an elaborate fortress from dessert plates and napkins. "We need a queen for the castle," he called out. I smiled genuinely this time and made my way back to table 19. The kids' table might not have been intended as a place of honor, but at that moment, it felt like exactly where I belonged, among the only honest people in the room. Rejoined my young companions just as the wedding band launched into their first set, a cover of Uptown Funk that had the dance floor filling rapidly. Trevor immediately crowned me with a napkin folded into a point, declaring me Queen Eliza of Dinosaur Land. I accepted the honor with appropriate solemnity. "What are your royal duties?" asked a serious little girl with glasses who had introduced herself as Paige. "Protecting the realm," I replied without hesitation. "Making sure everyone has enough to eat, safe places to live, and that no one gets too powerful." "Like Thanos?" Trevor suggested, wide-eyed. "Exactly like preventing Thanos," I agreed, helping him construct a moat from unused water glasses. Across the ballroom, Madison and Bradley took center stage for their first dance, a choreographed routine that had clearly required professional instruction. My sister moved gracefully in her custom Marchesa gown, while Bradley performed the steps with mechanical precision, his eyes occasionally drifting toward the exit. "Your sister looks like a princess," Paige observed, adjusting her glasses. "She does," I agreed, feeling a pang of genuine happiness for Madison despite everything. We had been close once, before our paths diverged so dramatically. She toward the society life our parents had always envisioned, me toward service and later business. The dance ended to enthusiastic applause, and Bradley immediately retreated to a circle of college friends while Madison was swept into photos with bridesmaids. My father took the microphone, champagne glass in hand, to deliver his speech. "When my little Madison told us she was dating a Prescott," he began, his voice carrying that particular cadence of practiced casualness that poorly masked his delight, "her mother and I tried not to get too excited." Polite laughter rippled through the guests. "But we've come to see that Bradley isn't just a good match on paper, though Lord knows, those credentials don't hurt." More knowing laughter. I took a sip of my chocolate milk, watching my father perform the role of successful patriarch, bestowing his greatest asset, his beautiful daughter, upon a worthy dynasty. "The Kincaids have always valued ambition, excellence, and success," he continued, raising his glass higher. "And today we're proud to join with a family that exemplifies those same values." I thought about my father's definition of success as, "I sat among discarded chicken nuggets in a child-sized chair." By his metrics, I had failed spectacularly. No prestigious husband, no lavish home in the Gold Coast, no country club membership. Just a combat action badge, 2 Purple Hearts, and a privately held company valued at just under $3 billion. The speeches continued. Bradley's father spoke next, his words carefully measured to convey the Prescotts' magnanimous acceptance of the Kincaids into their realm. The best man delivered an inappropriate story about Bradley's college exploits that had been poorly edited for the mixed audience. Finally, Madison's maid of honor gushed about destiny and perfect matches. No one asked me to speak. The sister of the bride, when that sister was an unmarried veteran with an unclear employment status, apparently didn't warrant microphone access. The band resumed playing, and the children at my table began fidgeting, clearly bored with the adult festivities. "Queen Eliza," Trevor tugged at my sleeve. "Can we go explore the castle?" I glanced around. No one was paying attention to the kids' table. The nearest adult supervision appeared to be a teenage cousin scrolling through her phone at the next. "Table over." "Royal expedition?" I suggested, and was met with immediate enthusiasm. I led my small troop of explorers out of the ballroom and into the grand foyer of Bellevue Estate. The historic mansion had been converted into an exclusive event venue years ago, its marble floors and crystal chandeliers the perfect backdrop for elite celebrations. Trevor and his cohort gazed wide-eyed at the elaborate woodwork and gilded mirrors. "This place is 1,000,000 years old," Trevor whispered reverently. "Close." "About 150, I corrected, guiding them away from priceless vases. "It was built by a lumber baron named Whitcomb back when Chicago was becoming a major city." I found myself giving an impromptu history lesson as we explored the public areas of the estate, drawing on information I'd learned during Sentinel's evaluation of historic properties in the region. The children were surprisingly engaged, especially when I incorporated details about secret passages and Prohibition-era smuggling operations. "How do you know all this stuff?" Paige asked, clearly impressed. "I work with old buildings," I explained simply, "helping make sure they're taken care of and used properly." "Like a building doctor?" Trevor suggested. I smiled. "Something like that." We completed our circuit of the ground floor and returned to the reception just as the cake cutting was announced. I ushered my charges back to our table, where fresh juice boxes awaited. A server approached with slices of the towering wedding cake, giving me an apologetic look as she set a child-sized portion before me. "I can bring you a proper piece," she whispered. "This is perfect, thank you," I replied, genuinely preferring the smaller serving of the overly sweet fondant creation. My phone buzzed again. This time it was a text from Diana. "Legal team confirms all documents are in order. Operations team, ready to begin portfolio review on Monday. Prescott Holdings has significant over-leverage issues. Call when you can." I tucked the phone away, contemplating the implications. If Bradley's family business was as overextended as Diana suggested, Sentinel's acquisition of their debt put us in a significant position of power. Not that I had any intention of wielding that power vindictively. Sentinel had built its reputation on ethical business practices and fair dealing. Still, there was a certain poetic justice to the situation. "Eliza." My mother's voice startled me from my thoughts. She stood beside our table, her expression a mix of embarrassment and irritation. "Several people have asked where you've disappeared to. Come join the adults for a while." I raised an eyebrow. "I've been right here at the table you assigned me." "Don't be difficult," she sighed. "Bradley's uncle Richard wants to meet you. He was in the army too, you know. Special forces in Vietnam." I suppressed the urge to point out the vast differences between modern warfare and Vietnam-era operations. "I'll come say hello," I conceded, turning to my table companions. "Duty calls, royal subjects, protect the realm while I'm gone." Trevor solemnly accepted the napkin crown I transferred to his head, clearly delighted with his promotion. I followed my mother across the ballroom to where a cluster of older men stood nursing tumblers of expensive scotch. Richard Prescott was immediately identifiable by his ramrod-straight posture and the Special Forces pin on his lapel. A small, dignified acknowledgement of his service that I appreciated more than the bombastic "thank you for your service" declarations civilians often offered. "Richard, this is my daughter Eliza. The one I mentioned was in the army," my mother announced, as though introducing a rare specimen. The older man's eyes sharpened with interest. "Captain Morgan," he said, extending his hand. "Bradley mentioned your rank. Where did you serve?" "Primarily Kandahar and Helmand provinces, sir. 75th Ranger Regiment." His eyebrows lifted slightly. "Rangers? Impressive. Not many women make it through that selection process." 14 in my class, sir." A look of genuine respect crossed his features. "And after discharge? Finding the transition challenging?" Before I could answer, my mother interjected. "Eliza's been struggling a bit to find her footing in civilian life. We've told her she should consider using her GI Bill for an MBA, but she's been resistant." I bit back my initial response. I actually completed my MBA at Georgetown 3 years ago, through a combination of GI benefits and scholarships. My mother blinked in surprise. You never mentioned, you never asked, I replied simply, before turning back to Richard. The transition had its challenges, but I've found my way. Glad to hear it, he said, giving me an appraising look. Too many veterans flounder after service. Civilian world doesn't always know what to do with our skill sets. Exactly, I agreed. That's actually what motivated my current work. And what is that? He asked. Again, my mother attempted to answer for me. Property management of some kind. Low-income housing, isn't it, dear? Real estate investment and development, I corrected, with a focus on creating sustainable housing solutions, including dedicated programs for veteran housing. Richard nodded approvingly. Worthy cause. Small operation? I smiled. Growing. She's being modest, my mother interjected, misinterpreting my reticence as embarrassment. Eliza's always had a charitable heart. Even if it doesn't pay particularly. Well, I caught Richard's eye and saw a flicker of understanding. He recognized the disconnect between my mother's perception and my carefully measured responses. The best operations start small and build on solid foundations, he offered. Military teaches that. Yes, sir, it does. Richard was just telling us about the Prescott's acquisition of Highland Towers, my mother said, eager to steer the conversation back to topics she understood. Apparently it's the largest real estate deal in Chicago this quarter. Is that so? I replied mildly. Leverage to high heaven, if you ask me, Richard muttered, lowering his voice. But Bradley's father doesn't appreciate my input on business matters. Interesting. Perhaps not everyone in the Prescott family approved of their aggressive expansion. Strategy. Richard served 20 years, my mother continued, and then went into manufacturing. Very successfully. Aerospace components, he clarified. Sold the company 5 years ago. Now I just annoy my brother by questioning his financial decisions at family gatherings. I laughed genuinely. A worthy retirement occupation. Speaking of questioning, he said, his tone becoming more serious. What's your take on the Chicago real estate market? Heading for a correction? In certain segments, I replied carefully. Particularly over-leveraged luxury developments without sufficient cash reserves. He nodded thoughtfully. That's what I keep telling them. Our conversation was interrupted by the appearance of my brother Andrew, who had clearly been dispatched. To find us. Mom, Madison's looking for you. They're about to do the bouquet toss. My mother immediately shifted into wedding mode. Oh, I need to make sure the photographers are positioned correctly. She hurried away, leaving me with Richard and Andrew. So you two are discussing real estate? Andrew asked, his tone suggesting, he found this amusing. Your sister has some interesting insights, Richard replied. More than I can say for my nephew's friends, who seem to think a rising market cures all financial sins. Andrew looked surprised at the older man's endorsement. Eliza's always been our family contrarian. Speaking of which, I noticed you abandoned your assigned table. The kids are better company than most adults here, I replied honestly. God, don't let Mom hear you say that, he laughed. She spent weeks on the seating arrangements. And yet, somehow her own daughter ended up at the children's table, I observed. Andrew had the grace to look uncomfortable. That was Madison's call, actually. She said you wouldn't mind since you're not bringing a +1 and don't really get the social importance of these things. I see. The revelation stung more than I expected. Madison had deliberately seated me with the children. It wasn't personal, Andrew insisted. Bradley's family had so many business associates that needed to be accommodated. It's fine, I said. The same response I'd been giving all evening. Richard watched our exchange with shrewd eyes. Family dynamics never change, do they? My brother still treats me like the impulsive younger sibling, despite my company outperforming his for 15 years straight. The bouquet toss was announced, and single women were being herded to the center of the dance floor. Andrew looked at me expectantly. "Not a chance," I stated firmly. "Mom will notice if you don't participate," he warned. "I've stormed Taliban positions, under fire," I reminded him. "I think I can handle Mom's disappointment about a bouquet toss." Richard chuckled appreciatively as Andrew shrugged and went to join his wife. "Morgan?" Richard said once we were alone. "I get the distinct impression there's more to your small operation than your family realizes." I smiled non-committally. "Families often see what they expect to see." "Indeed they do," he agreed. "My card." He slipped a business card into my hand. "If you're ever interested in discussing aerospace applications for veteran employment, give me a call. I still have connections in the industry." "I appreciate that, sir." "And Morgan?" "Yes, sir." "Whatever you're building, keep it close to the vest until it's unassailable. Family businesses are sharks when they smell blood in the water, even when it's family blood." With that cryptic piece of advice, he nodded and moved away to join a group of older guests, leaving me pondering his words. I turned to see Madison preparing to toss her bouquet. Single women, mostly bridesmaids and younger cousins, gathered eagerly on the dance floor. My mother scanned the room, her eyes narrowing when she spotted me hanging back. I sighed and moved slightly closer to the group, though I remained firmly at the perimeter. Madison turned her back to the crowd, counted to 3, and launched her elaborate floral arrangement over her shoulder. Whether by accident or design, the bouquet sailed directly toward me. Reflexively, I caught it, then immediately tried to pass it to an eager bridesmaid beside me. "No take-backs!" someone shouted, and suddenly all eyes were on me. The wedding photographer rushed over, insisting on photos of Madison and me with the bouquet. My sister embraced me with practiced affection. "Maybe this is your lucky charm," she whispered for the photographer's benefit. "God knows you could use some help in that department." I maintained my smile, acutely aware of the cameras. "Congratulations, Madison. I hope you'll be very happy." "I will be," she replied with absolute certainty. "Bradley's family is exactly what I've always wanted: established, respected, wealthy." "And that's enough?" I couldn't help asking. She gave me a pitying look. "Not everyone needs to save the world, Eliza. Some of us just want to enjoy it." The photographer directed us through several more poses before releasing me back into the reception. I handed the bouquet to a delighted teenage cousin and made my way toward the exit, suddenly needing fresh air. The night air was cool against my skin as I stepped onto the terrace overlooking Bellevue Estate's manicured grounds. Chicago's skyline glittered in the distance, the very towers and buildings that comprised significant portions of Sentinel's newest portfolio acquisitions, including Highland Towers, the crown jewel of Prescott Holdings' recent expansion, now effectively under my company's control. I took a deep breath, letting the irony of the situation wash over me. For 4 years, I had built Sentinel in relative obscurity, focusing on substance over appearance, ethical practices over quick profits. I had never sought my family's approval or understanding, knowing their values were fundamentally different from mine. Yet here I stood, at my sister's wedding to a man whose family's financial future had just unwittingly been placed in my hands. In 48 hours, the press release would go public. Sentinel Financial's acquisition of Meridian Trust would be announced, along with our control of billions in commercial real estate loans, including every property in Prescott Holdings. Chicago portfolio. My phone buzzed again. Another text from Diana. "Confidential. Initial review indicates Prescott Holdings is 3 months behind on Highland Towers payments. Previous lender was preparing foreclosure proceedings before our acquisition." I stared at the message, the implications sinking in. Bradley's family empire wasn't just over-leveraged, it was potentially on the verge of collapse. And now, Sentinel held the notes. The terrace door opened behind me and Trevor bounded out, still wearing his napkin crown. "Queen Eliza, we've been looking everywhere for you," It's time for the special dance. Special dance? Yeah, the daddy-daughter one. Aunt Madison is dancing with Grandpa, and Mom said you have to come watch. I allowed my young escort to lead me back inside, where the lights had dimmed and my father was indeed leading Madison in. A choreographed waltz. My mother stood at the edge of the dance floor, dabbing at her eyes with a monogrammed handkerchief. As I watched my sister and father move gracefully across the floor, I thought about the many ways families define success, value, and worth. By their measures, Madison had achieved everything: beauty, status, the right marriage. I had achieved nothing worthy of mention or proper seating. By Monday morning, those definitions would be upended, whether I wanted them to be or not. The father-daughter dance concluded to enthusiastic applause. My father kissed Madison's cheek before handing her back to Bradley, who immediately guided her toward a cluster of photographers. I watched my father scan the room, his eyes briefly meeting mine before moving on without acknowledgement. Despite everything, the dismissal still stung. "Did your dad forget to dance with you?" Trevor asked innocently, still standing beside me. "I think it's just for the bride," I explained, though we both knew that wasn't entirely true. At my cousin Jennifer's wedding last year, all the daughters had taken turns dancing with their fathers. "That's not fair," Trevor declared with the straightforward justice of childhood. "You should get a dance too." "It's okay, buddy. I'm not much of a dancer. Anyway, I can dance with you," he offered, extending his small hand with exaggerated formality. "My mom made me take lessons." I laughed and accepted his hand. "Well, in that case, I'd be honored." Trevor led me to the edge of the dance floor and began a surprisingly competent box step. I followed his lead, amused by his serious expression, as he concentrated on the movements. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, he counted under his breath. "You're pretty good, Auntie Eliza." "Thank you. You're quite the gentleman, Trevor." As we completed our impromptu dance, I noticed several people watching us, some with amusement, others with confusion. My mother's expression was particularly complex, a mixture of embarrassment and something that might have been regret. Trevor bowed dramatically when the song ended. "Thank you for the dance, Queen Eliza." I curtsied in return. "The pleasure was mine, Sir Trevor." He beamed and ran off to rejoin his friends, while I retreated to the periphery of the reception. The evening was winding down, with older guests beginning to depart, and the remaining crowd growing louder and less inhibited as the open bar continued to serve. My brother Andrew approached, 2 glasses of champagne in hand. He offered one to me. "Saw your dance partner abandoned you," he said, nodding toward Trevor, who was now attempting to slide across the polished floor in his dress socks. "Best dance of the night," I replied, accepting the champagne. Andrew clinked his glass against mine. "To Madison's perfect day." "To Madison," I agreed, taking a sip. We stood in companionable silence for a moment, watching the reception unfold. Despite our differences, Andrew had always been the family member I felt most connected to. He'd been supportive when I enlisted, even when our parents were horrified at the idea of their daughter in combat. "So, this property management thing," he began casually. "Is it working out? Mom seems to think you're one step away from living in your car." I nearly choked on my champagne. Did she actually say that? Not in those exact words, he admitted. But there was definitely concern about your financial stability at the last family dinner. Dad suggested setting up some kind of trust fund to help you through this phase. The absurdity of it made me laugh aloud. "That's incredibly unnecessary." That's what I told them, but you know how they are. They have very specific ideas about what success looks like. "I'm aware," I said dryly. "For what it's worth," Andrew continued, "I told them you were doing fine, that you've always had your own path. Thanks for the vote of confidence. Someone in this family should have it." He studied me for a moment. "You are doing okay though, right? I mean, really okay?" The sincerity in his question made me consider how much to reveal. Andrew had always kept my confidences, but this particular secret would be explosive in about 48 hours. I'm doing, well, I said carefully. Better than well, actually. The company I founded is thriving. His eyebrows rose. Founded? Not just working for? Sentinel Financial. We specialize in ethical real estate investment and development, with particular focus on veteran housing initiatives and historic preservation. Sentinel, he repeated, recognition dawning. Wait, I've read about them. Didn't they just win some major industry award for that veteran housing complex in Milwaukee? The Garrison Project, yes. That's impressive, Liz. He looked genuinely surprised. Why haven't you told anyone in the family? I gave him a pointed look. Would they have listened? Or would they have dismissed it as another one of my phases? He had the grace to look uncomfortable. Fair point. Besides, I continued, I wanted to build something substantive before making any announcements. Something unassailable. And have you? I thought about Diana's text messages, about the press release scheduled for Monday morning that would announce Sentinel's acquisition of Meridian Trust, and by extension, control of Prescott Holdings' debt. Yes, I said simply. I believe I have. Well, cheers to that, Andrew said, raising his glass again. Though I think you might enjoy Mom and Dad's reactions if you told them now. Some news is worth waiting for, I replied cryptically. Our conversation was interrupted by a commotion near the head table. Bradley's father was engaged in what appeared to be a heated discussion with another man in an expensive suit. Though they were keeping their voices low, their body language suggested significant tension. Wonder what that's about, Andrew mused. Pre-existing condition in the Prescott Empire, perhaps? I suggested, thinking of Diana's revelations about their financial troubles. What do you mean? Before I could respond, our mother appeared between us, her smile fixed but her eyes betraying tension. Andrew, Dr. Hessman is looking for you. He's very interested in discussing your research. She placed a hand on his arm, steering him away before turning to me. Eliza, dear, perhaps it's time for you to say your goodbyes. Many of the families with young children are departing. The dismissal was clear. The children were leaving, and since I'd been relegated to their table, I should leave too. Of course, I replied evenly. It's been a lovely evening. We'll see you at brunch tomorrow at the Four Seasons, she reminded me. 11 o'clock? Please try to be punctual. I wouldn't miss it. She nodded and hurried back toward the head table, where the tension between Bradley's father and the unknown man seemed to be escalating. I noticed Richard Prescott joining the conversation, his expression grave. I finished my champagne and began making my farewell rounds. Madison and Bradley were surrounded by their college friends, all showing signs of significant alcohol consumption. My sister air-kissed my cheek when I congratulated her again, while Bradley barely acknowledged my presence. Thanks for coming, Eliza, Madison said, her attention already drifting back to her friends. See you at brunch. I found Trevor and his cohort playing an improvised game of tag between the tables. I knelt to his level to say goodbye. I have to head out, buddy. Thanks for being my table companion and dance partner. Are you coming to breakfast tomorrow? He asked hopefully. Yes, I'll be there. Can you sit at my table again? I smiled. If they'll let me. I'll save you a seat, he promised solemnly. As I collected my wrap from the coat check, I noticed the man who had been arguing with Bradley's father exiting the venue, his expression thunderous. Outside, I watched as he made a heated phone call while waiting for the valet to bring his car. Doesn't matter what Bradley Sr. says, the numbers don't lie, I overheard as I passed. The entire Highland project is overextended, and if Meridian calls the note, he broke off when he noticed me, turning away to continue his conversation in private. I pretended not to have heard, but my mind was racing. The situation at Prescott Holdings was apparently common knowledge among their inner circle, which made their lavish wedding celebration all the more ironic. A financial house of cards, disguised by champagne and roses. My rental car arrived, and I slipped the valet an extra tip before sliding into the driver's seat. Instead of heading directly back to my hotel, I found myself driving toward downtown, Chicago, where the silhouette of Highland Towers dominated the skyline. The partially completed luxury condominium complex was illuminated by construction lights, its skeleton of steel and glass reaching toward the night sky. According to Diana's reports, the project was behind schedule and over budget, with pre-sales falling short of projections. A classic case of overambitious development without sufficient capital reserves. As of this morning, Sentinel Financial owned the debt on this building. We would have the power to foreclose, to restructure the loans, or to work with Prescott Holdings on a realistic path forward. The decision would ultimately be mine. I parked across from the construction site and rolled down my window, studying the tower that represented both the Prescott's ambition and their vulnerability. The evening breeze carried the faint sounds of the city, traffic, distant music, the eternal urban hum that had become so foreign to me after years in Portland's quieter environment. My phone rang, the display showing Diana's name. "I was just thinking about you," I answered. Or rather, about our new acquisition. "Great minds," Diana replied. "I'm still at the office reviewing the Prescott Holdings files. Eliza, it's worse than we initially thought. They've been juggling funds between projects for months, using new construction loans to cover payments on existing properties." "A house of cards," I murmured, watching the lights of Highland Towers. "Exactly. And from what I can tell, Meridian was aware of the situation, but chose not to act due to their own pending acquisition by us. They didn't want to trigger a high-profile foreclosure during negotiations, so they passed the hot potato to us. Essentially, we now have some difficult decisions to make. By the strictest reading of the loan covenants, we could initiate foreclosure proceedings immediately on at least 3 Prescott properties, including Highland Towers. I considered this information, watching a lone construction crane sway slightly in the night breeze. What would happen to the projects, to the people employed by them? Typical foreclosure process. Work would stop, contractors would go unpaid, pre-sale buyers would lose deposits unless protected by escrow. Approximately 300 jobs affected directly, more in supporting industries. The human cost was significant. This wasn't just about the Prescott family's hubris. It was about the workers, suppliers, and families who depended on these projects for their livelihoods. "Diana, I want a complete impact analysis on my desk by tomorrow evening. Alternative restructuring scenarios, potential partnership options, everything. We didn't build Sentinel to be predators." "Understood. Though I feel compelled to point out that Bradley Prescott Sr. would absolutely foreclose on us if positions were reversed." "Probably," I agreed. "But we're not him." After ending the call, I remained parked across from Highland Towers, contemplating the complex situation. The Prescott family had seated me at the children's table, dismissed my career and achievements, and generally treated me as an afterthought at best. A petty part of me wanted to savor the coming revelation of our respective positions. But the leader in me, the part shaped by military service and responsibility for others, recognized that this wasn't just about personal vindication. It was about making sound business decisions that aligned with Sentinel's core values of ethical investment and community benefit. I started the car and pulled away from the curb, the towers receding in my rearview mirror. Tomorrow's brunch would be interesting indeed, even if the full magnitude of the situation wouldn't be revealed until Monday's press release. Back at my hotel, I changed into comfortable clothes and opened my laptop to review the preliminary acquisition reports Diana had sent over. The more I read, the clearer the picture became. Prescott Holdings had been engaged in a dangerous financial shell game for years, using their reputation and connections to secure increasingly risky loans while projecting an image of unassailable success. Just like my sister's wedding, all spectacle, with shaky foundations underneath. I drafted a series of directives for Diana and the executive team, outlining my initial thoughts on how to approach the Prescott Holdings situation. While foreclosure remained an option, I was more interested in exploring restructuring possibilities that would preserve jobs while ensuring Sentinel's investment was protected. Perhaps there was a path forward that served all stakeholders better than a simple power play. After sending the email, I closed my laptop and moved to the hotel room window, gazing out at the Chicago skyline. The city where I'd grown up, where my family had established their particular hierarchy of values, and where I'd always felt like the odd one out. Now, I was returning not as the family disappointment, but as the owner of a $3 billion company with significant influence over the city's real estate landscape. The irony wasn't lost on me. My phone buzzed with a text from Andrew. Interesting development after you left. Bradley's father had some kind of heated conversation with several investors. Madison is furious that it disrupted her perfect day. See you at brunch for what promises to be a tense family gathering, I replied with a non-committal, looking forward to it, before setting my alarm for early morning. I wanted to get in a run and review the latest acquisition documents before facing the Kincaid-Prescott alliance at brunch. As I prepared for bed, I found myself thinking about Trevor and our dance. His straightforward kindness and sense of fairness had been a bright spot in an otherwise tense evening. Children often see what adults miss, the simple truths behind complicated facades. The truth was that I had never sought my family's validation in the way Madison had. I had built Sentinel not to impress them, but because I believed in its mission. The fact that it had grown into something that would inevitably command their respect was secondary to the impact we were making for veterans and communities. Still, a small part of me couldn't help looking forward to the moment when they realized just who they had seated at the kids' table. Sleep came slowly that night, my mind cycling through potential scenarios for the coming days. By the time I finally drifted off, one thing had become clear. Whatever happened next would redefine my relationship with my family permanently. The carefully maintained distance between Captain Eliza Morgan, founder and CEO of Sentinel Financial, and Eliza Kincaid, the family's underachieving middle child, was about to collapse. And in its place would emerge a new reality, one where perception and power would shift irrevocably. The only question was whether bridges would be built on these new foundations, or whether they would burn entirely. Morning arrived with Chicago's distinctive lakefront light filtering through my hotel curtains. I was already awake, reviewing acquisition documents on my tablet when the first rays broke the horizon. Military habits die hard. I'd been up since 5, had completed a 5-mile run along the lakefront path, and was halfway through my second cup of coffee. Diana had sent over additional reports overnight. The picture they painted of Prescott Holdings' financial situation was increasingly concerning. Not just over-leveraged, but potentially engaging in practices that skirted ethical and legal boundaries. Fund transfers between segregated project accounts. Construction loan draws for work not yet performed. Investor funds commingled with operational accounts. I set down my tablet and moved to the window, watching the city come alive below. The Prescott's financial manipulations weren't just about their family's wealth. They affected contractors, employees, investors, and buyers who had put deposits on unfinished properties like Highland Towers. People who had acted in good faith, unaware of the instability beneath the prestigious Prescott name. My phone rang. Diana again. "Did you review the overnight reports?" she asked without preamble. "Just finishing them now. It's worse than we thought. Significantly. I've forwarded everything to legal, but their preliminary assessment is that we may have regulatory obligations here. Some of these practices potentially cross into reportable territory." I pinched the bridge of my nose. What had started as an ironic twist of fate, acquiring my new brother-in-law's family business debts, was evolving into something more serious. What are our options if we want to avoid an immediate collapse scenario? Diana was silent for a moment. Legally, we could negotiate new terms, implement stricter oversight, require additional collateral, or convert some debt to equity with management rights. But Eliza, I need to be clear. Given what we're seeing, any accommodation would need to come with significant structural changes at Prescott Holdings, including leadership changes, I concluded. Almost certainly, she agreed. The current management has demonstrated either incompetence or willful misconduct. Neither inspires confidence. I glanced at the time, 9:30 a.m. The morning after, brunch at the Four Seasons was scheduled for 11h. I need to attend a family event in about 90 minutes. Have legal prepare a complete options assessment for me by this afternoon. And Diana. Keep this contained for now. The press release goes out tomorrow as scheduled, but I want to be the one to determine how we approach the Prescott situation. Understood. Will you inform your family today about your position? I considered the question. Not yet. Let me assess the situation in person first. After ending the call, I dressed carefully, tailored charcoal slacks, a cream silk blouse, and a subtle but expensive watch that had been my first major purchase after Sentinel secured its initial round of funding. Professional, polished, but not overtly showy. The kind of outfit that would have my mother wondering if I'd finally started taking my appearance seriously without revealing the substantial change in my circumstances. The Four Seasons was only a few blocks from my hotel. I arrived precisely at 11, the lobby bustling with wedding guests and Sunday brunchers. The private dining room reserved for the Kincaid Prescott post-wedding celebration was easy to locate. It was the one with the embossed welcome sign featuring the couple's entwined monograms in gold foil. I paused at the entrance, taking in the scene. Round tables beautifully arranged with fresh flowers and champagne flutes. A lavish buffet staffed by white-coated servers. A string quartet playing quietly in the corner. The unmistakable aura of wealth and privilege that had defined my family's social aspirations for as long as I could remember. Madison and Bradley were holding court near the windows overlooking the lake, surrounded by an admiring circle of friends and relatives. My parents stood nearby, my father deep in conversation with Bradley Sr. while my mother directed staff about some detail of the arrangement. And there, at a small table near the children's activity area, sat Trevor. When he spotted me, he waved enthusiastically, pointing to the empty chair beside him that he had indeed saved as promised. I waved back with a smile, but before I could join him, my mother intercepted me. "Eliza, you're on time." She kissed the air near my cheek. "And you look appropriate." "Good. Thank you, Mother. The brunch looks lovely." Bradley's parents insisted on the Four Seasons. Nothing but the best for their only son. She straightened, my collar slightly, a habitual gesture that still managed to make me feel like an inadequately dressed child. "Come say hello to everyone. Madison was just asking if you'd arrived." I doubted that very much, but I allowed myself to be steered toward the newlyweds. Madison embraced me with practiced affection when I approached. "Eliza, you disappeared so early last night. Was the reception not to your liking?" Her tone suggested genuine concern, but her eyes held a different message, one of superiority and subtle accusation. "It was beautiful," I assured her. "I just had an early call this morning." "On a Sunday?" Bradley interjected, his eyebrow raised skeptically. "What kind of property management requires weekend work?" "The successful kind," I replied simply. He laughed as though I'd made a joke. "Well, I suppose we all have different definitions of success." "We certainly do," I agreed, maintaining my pleasant expression. Madison linked her arm through her new husband's. "Bradley's father just finalized the Highland Towers financing yesterday. It's going to be the premier luxury development in the city, penthouses starting at $12 million. "Very impressive," I said, thinking of the reports detailing the project's precarious financial state. Ambitious timeline for completion? End of next year, Bradley replied confidently. Ahead of schedule and under budget, naturally. Both claims were demonstrably false according to Sentinel's newly acquired records, but I simply nodded. I look forward to seeing the finished project. My father joined our circle, clapping Bradley on the shoulder with obvious approval. Eliza, Bradley was just telling me about their expansion plans. The Prescotts are redefining the Chicago skyline. Among other things, I murmured. What was that, dear? My mother asked. Nothing important. Excuse me. I promised Trevor I'd sit with him. I moved away from the group before anyone could object, feeling Bradley's dismissive gaze follow me. Let him think what he wanted. In less than 24 hours, the dynamics would shift dramatically. Trevor beamed as I took the seat beside him. You came. I told Mom you would sit with me, but she said you'd probably want to sit with the grown-ups today. Why would I do that when I could sit with the most interesting person in the room? I replied, helping him spread jam on his croissant. Trevor and I were halfway through constructing a tower out of fruit skewers when a commotion near the entrance caught my attention. Richard Prescott had arrived, engaged in what appeared to be a heated discussion with his brother. Bradley Sr.'s face was flushed, his carefully maintained composure slipping as he gestured emphatically. He looks mad, Trevor observed, following my gaze. Very perceptive, I agreed, watching as the two men moved their conversation to a corner of the room, joined moments later by the same man I'd seen arguing with Bradley Sr. at the wedding reception. My phone vibrated in my pocket. Another message from Diana. Just discovered Prescott diverted $4.2 million from Highland Construction escrow to cover margin calls on personal investments. Documentation attached. This crosses into potential criminal territory. Legal advises immediate action. I took a slow, measured breath. The situation had escalated beyond a simple case of over-leveraging. If these allegations were accurate, Bradley's father had potentially committed securities fraud, putting at risk not just his company, but the investments and deposits of hundreds of people. More juice, Auntie Eliza? Trevor asked, oblivious to the storm gathering across the elegant brunch. Yes, please, I replied automatically, my mind racing through implications and options. My mother approached our table, her smile strained. Eliza, darling, Bradley's father has expressed interest in speaking with you. Something about veteran programs? Has he? I raised an eyebrow, suspecting this had more to do with his conversation with Richard than any sudden interest in veterans. Yes, he mentioned that Richard spoke highly of your volunteer work. I suppressed a smile at her characterization. I'll be right over. After promising Trevor I'd return to complete our architectural masterpiece, I made my way to where Bradley Sr. stood with Richard and the unknown man, who was now being introduced as Martin Wells, CFO of Prescott Holdings. Ah, Ms. Kincaid, Bradley Sr. greeted me with manufactured warmth. Richard tells me you're involved with veterans' housing initiatives. Excellent cause. Prescott Holdings has always been committed to community support. When it's tax-deductible, Richard muttered under his breath. Bradley Sr. shot his brother an irritated look before continuing. We're actually exploring potential charitable partners for Highland Towers. Perhaps your organization might be interested in a discussion. Now I understood. They needed positive PR, possibly to distract from financial issues. A veterans' housing partnership would make excellent publicity. That's an interesting proposition, I replied carefully. Though I should clarify that Sentinel Financial isn't a charity. We're a private equity firm specializing in ethical real estate investment, with veteran housing as one of our core initiatives. Bradley Sr.'s expression flickered briefly. Sentinel Financial? I wasn't aware that I founded and serve as CEO of a $3 billion investment firm. I finished pleasantly. It doesn't come up much at family gatherings. Richard laughed, outright, while Martin Wells studied me with new interest. $3 billion, you say? Bradley Sr.'s tone had shifted subtly. And your focus is real estate investment? Precisely. In fact, we've been quite active in the Chicago market recently. Before he could respond, Martin's phone rang. He excused himself to take the call, stepping a few feet away. I noticed his expression changing from neutral to alarmed as he listened to the caller. "If you'll excuse me," he said upon returning, his voice tight. "There's a situation that requires immediate attention." Bradley Sr. frowned. "What situation? The Highland investors?" "No," Martin replied, looking distinctly uncomfortable. "It's Meridian Trust. They've apparently been acquired, and the new owner is requesting an immediate meeting regarding our loan portfolio." I kept my expression neutral as Bradley Sr.'s face drained of color. "Who acquired Meridian?" he demanded. Martin glanced at me, then back at his boss. "They wouldn't say. Just that the announcement goes public tomorrow morning, and they want representatives from Prescott Holdings in their office by 9 a.m. "Ridiculous," Bradley Sr. blustered. "We have agreements in place. They can't just—" "Actually," I interrupted, gently, acquisition terms typically include review clauses for outstanding loans, especially those with irregular payment histories. All three men turned to stare at me. "And how would you know about our payment history with Meridian?" Bradley Sr. asked, his voice dangerously quiet. I smiled. "Just a general observation about standard banking practices. I'm sure Prescott Holdings maintains impeccable financial records." Richard gave me a shrewd look. "You know something, don't you?" Before I could respond, my mother appeared again, seemingly oblivious to the tension. "Everything all right? Here? The mimosas are being served, and Madison is about to open some of the gifts." "Everything's fine, Mrs. Kincaid," Bradley Sr. assured her, his business smile firmly back in place. "Your daughter was just sharing some fascinating insights about the financial markets." My mother looked surprised. "Eliza? Financial insights? Even a broken clock is right twice a day. Isn't that what you always say, Mother?" I replied sweetly. She had the grace to look embarrassed. "Well, I'm sure Bradley Sr. knows much more about such matters than any of us. His family has been in real estate development for generations." "And yet," Richard commented dryly, "sometimes fresh perspectives can be quite illuminating." Bradley Sr. checked his watch. "If you'll excuse me, I need to make a few calls. Martin, you'll come with me." As they strode away, Richard turned to me with open curiosity. "Sentinel Financial acquired Meridian Trust, didn't they?" "I couldn't possibly comment on pending announcements," I replied, though my smile told him everything he needed to know. "Well played, Captain Morgan," he chuckled. "I suspect tomorrow will be quite interesting for my brother. For the entire Prescott Kincaid alliance, I imagine." My mother looked between us, confusion evident on her face. "What are you two talking about?" "Eliza, you're not bothering Richard with your little investment theories, are you?" Richard's eyebrows shot up at her condescending tone. "On the contrary, Mrs. Kincaid, your daughter has provided the most stimulating conversation of this entire wedding weekend. You must be very proud of her accomplishments." "Oh, well, yes, of course," my mother stammered, clearly caught off guard. "Eliza has always been determined enough to build a multi-billion-dollar company while the rest of you thought she was struggling to make rent," Richard stated bluntly. "If that were my daughter, I'd be shouting it from the rooftops." My mother's expression cycled rapidly through confusion, disbelief, and finally, dawning comprehension. "Eliza, is this true?" "Perhaps we should discuss this later, Mother," I suggested, noting that Madison was trying to get everyone's attention for the gift opening. "No, I think we should discuss it now," she insisted, her voice rising slightly. "What exactly is Sentinel Financial, and why haven't you told us about it?" Our conversation was beginning to attract attention. Madison looked over with irritation, while my father approached with a concerned expression. "Is everything all right?" he asked, placing a proprietary hand on my mother's shoulder. Apparently, our daughter is some sort of financial magnate, my mother said, her voice caught between accusation and bewilderment. A CEO of a company worth billions, if Richard is to be believed. My father's gaze shifted to me, his expression skeptical. Is this true, Eliza? I met his eyes steadily. Yes. I founded Sentinel Financial 4 years ago. We specialize in ethical real estate investment, with a particular focus on veteran housing initiatives and historic preservation. And you never thought to mention this? His tone held the familiar note of disapproval that had colored our relationship since I'd chosen the military over law school. I mentioned my work many times, I replied calmly. No one seemed particularly interested in the details. Well, we're certainly interested now, my mother declared. Why would you keep something like this secret from your own family? I glanced around, aware that our conversation was drawing increasing attention from other guests. Madison was staring at us, her gift-opening ceremony temporarily forgotten. This isn't the time or place, I said quietly. Madison's brunch shouldn't be derailed by my professional life. Too late for that, Andrew commented, joining our circle. The Prescotts are huddled in the corner having what appears to be a financial crisis, and you're apparently the secret billionaire of the family. I'd say the brunch is officially derailed. Billionaire? My father repeated, his voice rising. Eliza, what exactly is going on? Before I could respond, Trevor tugged at my sleeve, completely unaware of the tension surrounding us. Auntie Eliza, our tower is falling. Can you help? Of course, buddy, I replied, grateful for the escape. Excuse me, family emergency, I added to my parents with a pointed look at Trevor. As I walked away, I heard my mother's voice. Richard, perhaps you could explain exactly what my daughter has been doing that we apparently know nothing about. Trevor and I reinforced our fruit skewer structure, adding structural supports using cocktail picks. While we worked, I became aware of Bradley approaching our table, his expression a mix of confusion and calculated interest. Eliza, he began without preamble, my father seems to think you might be involved with Meridian Trust's acquisition. Does he? I continued adjusting the tower, not looking up. Is it true? Bradley's tone hardened slightly. I finally met his gaze. All relevant parties will be fully informed through proper channels. Tomorrow, 9 a.m. His jaw tightened. This isn't just business, Eliza. This is family. Is it? I asked mildly. Yesterday I was the embarrassing sister-in-law seated at the children's table. Today I'm suddenly family when you think I might affect your bottom line. Trevor looked between us, sensing the tension. Is he bothering you, Queen Eliza? Bradley blinked in confusion at the title. Not at all, Sir Trevor. Just a grown-up discussion about responsibility. Like when you said real queens protect their people? Trevor asked innocently. Exactly like that, I agreed, ruffling his hair. Bradley's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, his expression darkening further before looking back at me. This conversation isn't over. No, I agreed. It's just beginning. As he walked away, Madison intercepted him, her expression demanding answers. I watched as they engaged in a heated, whispered exchange, her dream brunch disintegrating around her. My father approached next, pulling up a chair at our table without waiting for an invitation. Eliza, he began, his tone somewhere between stern and bewildered. I think you owe us an explanation. I owe you? I raised an eyebrow. Yes, he insisted. If what Richard says is true, you've been deliberately hiding your success from this family for years. Why would you do that? I considered his question, aware of Trevor listening intently beside me. Trevor, I said gently, would you mind checking if they have any more strawberries at the buffet? Our tower needs a flag on top. Once he was out of earshot, I turned back to my father. I didn't hide anything. I simply stopped seeking approval that was never going to come. When I left the military, you and Mother made it clear that unless I followed the paths you'd laid out, law, medicine, or marrying well, I would never measure up to your standards. That's not fair, he protested. We only wanted what was best for you. No, I corrected him. You wanted what looked best to your friends. There's a difference. He fell silent, unable to dispute the truth of my assessment. So I built something. On my own terms, I continued. Something that aligned with my values, not yours. And it succeeded beyond even my expectations. And now you own the debt on Bradley's family properties, he concluded, the pieces finally connecting, including Highland Towers. The press release goes out tomorrow, I confirmed. Sentinel Financial has acquired Meridian Trust, including their entire loan portfolio. My father sank back in his chair, the implications washing over him. My God, Eliza, do you realize what this means? The Prescotts will be at the mercy of the daughter you seated at the kids' table, I finished for him. Yes, I'm aware of the irony. As the truth spread across the brunch, conversations hushed and then resumed with greater intensity. I could feel eyes turning toward me. The overlooked middle child suddenly revealed as a power player in her own right. Madison stormed over, her perfect bridal glow replaced by fury. What have you done? She demanded. Bradley says you're threatening his family's business. I've done nothing except build a successful company, I replied calmly. If the Prescott's business is threatened, it's by their own financial decisions, not mine. You have to fix this, she insisted. Bradley says they could lose everything. Interesting, I observed. When you thought I had nothing, you seated me with the children. Now that you think I have influence, you demand I use it for your benefit. Her eyes widened at my directness. This isn't about seating arrangements. This is about family loyalty. Is it? Then perhaps we should discuss what family loyalty means to the Kincaids, I suggested. Because from where I've been sitting, quite literally, it seems to be a one-way street. Before she could respond, Trevor returned with a triumphant smile and a perfect strawberry. For the Tower flag, he announced proudly. The simple joy of his contribution cut through the tension. I took the strawberry with appropriate ceremony. A perfect crowning touch, Sir Trevor. Thank you. Madison stared at us for a moment longer before turning on her heel and rejoining Bradley, who was now in deep conversation with his father and several men in suits who had apparently been summoned to the brunch. My phone buzzed with another message from Diana. Legal team standing by. Decision on Prescott Holdings needed by end of day. I typed a quick response. Proceeding as discussed. Prepare restructuring proposal with oversight provisions and leadership changes. No foreclosure at this time. Because that's what this was. Really about not revenge or vindication, but responsibility. The easy path would be to foreclose on the Prescott's properties, watching their empire crumble while my family finally acknowledged my success. But that would harm innocent contractors, employees, and investors who had nothing to do with the family's arrogance or financial mismanagement. A true leader protects their people, as I had told Trevor. And sometimes that meant making difficult decisions that transcended personal satisfaction. The brunch continued in a strange limbo, gifts still being opened, champagne still flowing, but with an undercurrent of tension that couldn't be ignored. I finished the fruit tower with Trevor and his friends, maintaining a bubble of normalcy amid the adult chaos swirling around us. As the event drew to a close, Andrew sat down beside me, shaking his head in amazement. You know, when I woke up, this morning I didn't expect to discover that my middle sister is essentially the banker for our new in-laws, he commented. Life takes interesting turns. That it does, I agreed. So what happens now? I considered his question. Tomorrow, the press release goes public. Sentinel announces its acquisition of Meridian Trust. The Prescotts come to our offices to discuss their outstanding loans and future arrangements. And will you be merciful or merciless? he asked, only half joking. Neither, I replied. I'll be fair, which is all I ever wanted from this family. Andrew nodded thoughtfully. For what it's worth, I'm proud of you, Liz. Not because you built a billion-dollar company, but because you did it your way, with your values intact. His words meant more than he could know. The first genuine recognition I'd received from any family member. As guests began departing, my parents approached one final time. My mother's expression was a complex mixture of emotions. Pride, warring with embarrassment, confusion with belated recognition. Eliza, she began hesitantly, your father and I have been talking. We obviously have a lot to learn about what you've been doing these past few years. Obviously, I agreed. Perhaps you could join us for dinner this week. A proper conversation, without distractions. It was as close to an apology as I was likely to get, at least for now. I'll check my schedule. The next few days will be quite busy with the acquisition announcement. Of course. My father nodded, a new respect evident in his tone. Just let us know when you're available. We'd like to hear about your company. Properly, this time. As they walked away, I felt a small hand slip into mine. Trevor looked up at me with solemn eyes. Are you really a queen? He asked. I smiled. Not exactly, but I do run a big company that helps people have homes and jobs. He considered this. That sounds queen-like to me. Thank you, Trevor. That might be the nicest compliment I've received all weekend. I gathered my things and prepared to leave, stopping briefly to say goodbye to Madison and Bradley. Their reception was chilly but civil, both clearly uncertain how to interact with this new version of me that had emerged. I'll see you both tomorrow, I said simply. 9 a.m. at the Sentinel offices. As I walked out of the Four Seasons into the bright Chicago afternoon, my phone rang once more. Diana, checking in for final instructions before tomorrow's announcement. Everything. Set for the press release? I asked. All ready, she confirmed. And the Prescott Holdings situation? I looked back at the hotel, where my family and the Prescotts were still processing the revelation that would reshape all our relationships. Prepare the restructuring proposal as discussed, I instructed. We'll offer them a path forward, but with our conditions. Full financial transparency, leadership changes, and adherence to ethical business practices going forward. And if they refuse? They won't, I replied confidently. Because despite everything, I suspect they're about to discover something important. About me. Something my family never understood until today. What's that? That being underestimated can be the greatest advantage of all. I ended the call and stepped into the sunlight, ready to face whatever came next. Not as the family disappointment, not as the vengeful victor, but as Captain Eliza Morgan, who had built something meaningful on her own terms. Sometimes the person they seat at the kids' table becomes the one they must answer to, and sometimes the greatest success isn't about proving others wrong. It's about staying true to your own values, even when no one else sees your worth. If you've ever been underestimated, overlooked, or quietly counted out, then maybe you see a little of yourself in my story. I didn't set out to prove my family wrong. I just wanted to build something real, something meaningful that reflected my values rather than their expectations. If this story resonated with you, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Have you ever been underestimated? What did you build in silence while others doubted you? How did you respond when the truth finally emerged? Let's give each other credit for the quiet work, the long nights, the tough choices. And if you're facing a moment when the world expects nothing from you, remember that other people's perceptions don't define your potential. Support this journey by subscribing to the channel. There are more stories ahead about resilience, integrity, and defining success on your own terms. Because sometimes the most powerful statement isn't what you say, but what you build when no one's watching. So subscribe, stay with me, and let's create something that matters.